Which one?
This one.
On the left, in the gold?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know, perhaps.
Don't tell.
It's grown a lot.
And then this one is.
Oh, in terms of the clothing.
This is what you call
At the moment,
Yeah. But this one, this one almost in. And she gets out of school.
brought back like some boxes from Fremont,
Oh.
Erie, Oklahoma City, Sullivan,
Well,
Do we have an actual photograph of mine? Hi, Sarah, how are you?
So I did that for every book. So, and then all the things that had stuff written on it. The chapters are all in different order now. And so, I'm trying to get all the other little papers with full writing on it, interesting.
So when you donate your research
Yeah,
collection,
it's, but I think I'm pretty much finished with this and then the final stuff. So,
I was just after almost everything.
when I'm ready to do
When I began to wear soft clothes. We didn't wear church clothes. When did they stop wearing church? We stopped wearing church clothes. Oh, yeah, well, see, I was after the
What's the
At the very beginning of a new era.
That's right, that's right.
Shelby?
stained glass? Yeah, it's.
Well, I'm glad you
It was
were.
in, Mobile, but I think it's from New Orleans. Yeah, I think the New Orleans sisters brought it with them from somewhere, nobody seems to know. Well, it's from New Orleans, but they brought it to Mobile.
In the South Central, the whole Block Coast, had their meetings somewhere between Mobile and New Orleans. So that's one.
You don't know where the original.
Older and wiser.
Yeah, from New Orleans.
Well, we don't know where, nobody seems to remember.
I drove down. I was thinking I was walking, I thought I was late.
We have 8 people watching here.
Do we really? That's awesome.
I have it set up to where people can put questions or I can't figure out how to turn it. So it's just gonna be
That's fun. Where do you want me to stand? Just I guess just like right in front of the table.
I did start.
okay. Well, do you want me to start now?
There's still be, but
So
this is the beginning of speakers.
This was a recent transplant to Mobile.
Yeah. Hello.
Welcome to the inaugural event of our new Mercy Archives Speaker Series program. We're very proud to have it begin today. The mission of Mercy Archives is to preserve and relate the stories of mercy. And this new program, the Speaker Series, has been developed to do just that, but in a more direct way than most of our other programming. Today is the culmination of many years' interest in developing and hosting such a program here at Mercy Heritage Center, the Central Repository and History Center for the Religious Community Sisters of Mercy of the Americas. A special thanks goes out to the Strategic Planning Committee, whose guidance and input several years ago led to the idea for this program, as well as to Shelby Dry, who's listed in the back. She's archives coordinator for us, and she is the one that implemented the entire program. So thank you, Shelby. Now that we have systems in place to better manage COVID, we are fortunate to host this program both in person and virtually. Hello to the audience. Today our guests will be Sister Cynthia Serjak and Clarke Armstrong, archives technician, who will be discussing our ongoing music project, describing the intersection of music and life within Mercy. Sister Cynthia started her life within Mercy over 50 years ago, and in that time has developed and shared many gifts and talents in service to the community. Our other speaker, Clarke, came to us at Mercy Heritage Center as a volunteer over a year now, and has transitioned to an official technician, working primarily on this project in the archives here in Belmont. Thank you both for sharing your time and your energy today. Please stay tuned for more information on our upcoming sessions, and for a revisit of today's session, please visit the Mercy Heritage Center YouTube channel. Thanks, Shelby, again for that. Thank you again, Sister Cynthia and Clarke. Take it away.
You guys hear me? Awesome. As Kat was saying, I'm Clarke. I am the archives technician here. And it's been such an exciting experience being on this project. I've loved music my whole life, so getting to be hands-on with something so special and so unique is just an honor. Working with and under Cynthia has been fantastic. She is sharp as a tack. And if you have a question about anything, it's like she just knows. It's awesome. And so it's really great to get to work with her and work under Maureen as well, and Marion. So I have been working on this. I talk with my hands, so we're gonna go ahead and put this down so I'm not throwing the speaker around. I've been working on this project for a little over a year, and we found some really awesome stuff. We've found a lot of things you wouldn't think that you would have found. And I can honestly say a lot of it was really unexpected, but has become more and more like a treasure hunt every day. We started out this project with basically like a draft, a list of places we knew there would be some music to discover, just boxes full of just music. And then slowly but surely it's been like digging, trying to find little pieces. We started with a big list, then we went through stuff that wasn't quite fully processed yet. Then we went again, and I'm going through box by box, trying to find things that might have been written by or for sisters for jubilees or anniversaries or in little programs and centennial celebrations, you know, that fun little word. Just to see if there's anything we might have missed, because we want to have as much of a comprehensive list for you guys if you're looking for a specific song as we possibly can. But throughout this project, I know a lot less about the beginning of it and its origins. Sister Cynthia does. So I will relieve the mic.
Thanks so much, Clarke. As you know, and as Kat said, I've been a Sister of Mercy most of my life, and I've been a musician all of my life. And I've been so blessed to be able to live both of those things in a very full way. They complement each other. The sisters have been entirely supportive of my musical growth and some probably pretty wild projects that I attempted. And I've also given a lot back to Mercy in terms of particular settings of text of Catherine and some other things as needed. So I started out as a piano player, and by God's good graces discovered the pipe organ and fell in love with that, and then moved a bit into composing. And it's really as a composer that I sit here today, because what began to happen over the years, and particularly after the founding event in '91, and even more so after I moved to Silver Spring and began to work in the Institute office, sisters in particular, other people as well, would call me and say, can you send me the music for fill in the blank? And I'm gonna give a particular example. It was often, can you send me the music for the Suscipes of Catherine McCauley? So I would say, exactly, that's the question. I would say, which one? And there'd usually be a pause on the other end of the line, and then the person would say, I didn't know there was more than one. So I'd say, well, do you have anything? Like, are you looking at a program where there might be a name of a composer? You know, what do you have? So we kind of tried from there to figure out which one the person is looking for. Sometimes it meant one of us singing to say, you know, is it this one? Is it this one? And of course, I learned that there are a couple that are very popular. So that was fine. But after a number of years, I began to think, you know, what's going to happen when I'm not in this office anymore? What's going to happen when I'm not available anymore? And my computer files are not available. So I thought, well, obviously, things need to be more permanently handled. And then I knew immediately where I had to go. So I came here, and my recollection is that at that first meeting, it was Betsy and Emily and Kat. We sat around the table downstairs. And I told them what I just told you. And what I realized by the end of the meeting is I came with this kind of question, and I left with this kind of question, which was exciting, but a bit overwhelming. Because one of the first questions we asked was, well, what's Mercy music? Is it music written by Sisters of Mercy? And what about all the music that Sisters of Mercy have written that's not Mercy? Mass settings, for example, are not necessarily Mercy. Responsorial songs, and then there's school songs, and ditties of various kinds. So like what qualifies and how do we describe that? Another thing we started to talk about was, well, when we find all this music, how could we protect it? Because most of it's not published, so it's not copyrighted. So people wouldn't have a way of asking for permission. So how could we organize things so that our music is protected? And then we got into, what about recordings? You know, like some of our music is recorded, a lot of it isn't. But wouldn't it be helpful if you could go on the website and here's a list of the Suscipes, and you could click on it and hear it and say, that's the one I want, or no, that's not the one I want. And then you go on to the next one. I mean, that's a really kind of dream. But nevertheless, you see what I mean about this first conversation. It was just so expansive and exciting, and thank God there were 3 other people sitting at the table who I knew had much more experience in figuring out these things than I did. So I left that meeting with a piece of homework, which was to try to get in contact with the living composers and simply say to them, would you please organize your music in a way that you want it to be preserved and send it to the archives? So some people, of course, who are published, notably Suzanne Toulon and also Marian Arroyo, they both published a lot. For them, it's, you know, kind of easy. And I knew that archivists were already working on their stuff. But then there were people like myself who don't have very much published. And then there were people who have little refrains here and there and had to say, oh gosh, I don't even know where all this stuff is, you know. And then there were a couple people who have written songs, but they don't know how to write them down. And so they had to go find somebody to to help them write it down. So, and then there are people who didn't respond at all. You know, we're a microcosm of the population, so that's how it goes, right? There are people who respond right away, people who don't. So I spent quite a bit of time, you know, sort of gently prodding people, getting back to them, and then finally about the third time I'd say, look, I'm not gonna bother you anymore, but I just would really, we all want things to be preserved and available. So if you can do that, that would be really helpful. So that kind of describes to you the beginnings of the project. We're now at a point where I've stopped nudging the composers. Whatever they've done is what they're doing. And if I see them, I might, you know, have a conversation and say, I hope you've sent everything, or, you know. So what we need to do now is kind of turn back to Clarke and ask the question, as she began to research, what did she find?
We found so much. So as Sister Cynthia was saying, there are so many Suscipes. I think right now where it stands, we have Suscipes by about 14 or 15 different sisters. We have multiple different types, so the text is varying from Suscipe to Suscipe. And a lot of people don't realize that the Suscipe that you pray, spoken, oftentimes is slightly different than the one that you sing, because over time, the sisters might have rearranged it or changed a thine to a thy. The opening line, actually, for the original Suscipe by Mother Macaulay, was, instead of for all eternity, thine for all eternity, or no, for time and eternity, it was, yes, she knows. So it's little things. I mean, the soul and the spirit of Sister Mother Macaulay, she's still completely in it, but the words change just a little bit from Suscipe to Suscipe, whether it's an adaptation or if it's word for word, which I thought was fascinating. And then there's a little bit of argument just as to which one's the right one. Is it the limerick? Is it the other one? Like there's 2 or 3 different versions and adaptations. So it was really interesting to read about the life of Mother Macaulay and her accounts after her death and the way that the Suscipe kind of molded and changed over time. So I put a lot of time in looking into that, because I know that matters a lot. But yeah, we're looking at probably about 15 different Suscipes right now. And we do have them all available, but something that can be noted is we don't actually have the full accompaniment for every one of them, which it's kind of strange. We've had a couple of opportunities where people will be like, hey, do you have, for example, the accompaniment for Lane Deasy's? And we're like, actually, no, we only have the vocal scores. So if any of you know anybody, I know she said she's gonna stop pushing, but send me some accompaniment so I can send it to your sisters. But yeah, what we have completely just depends on what was sent to us by sisters, and maybe not all sisters played piano. Some people wrote them on guitar. Some people only sang, so they only did the vocal notes. So each one that we have is slightly different, which is, I think, pretty interesting. I never really thought about that. So we have people that will ask for a specific version, but you don't really think. You think, oh, sheet music. It's not. Let me think. We've got more things. I think probably the coolest thing that I found is also the oldest thing that I found, and it's called None at Death. We were talking about this. The title at face value kind of sounds a little macabre, a little like dark even, which is perfect considering it's October now, spooky Halloween. But when I actually read it, because I went back after our conversation, and they actually do have lyrics to it. We have full accompaniment, full choral parts, multiple part harmony. It was a published piece of work, and it was from 1876, so it's very early in the community. It is currently in our Chicago collection, and it is the original copy. So we've got a few copies of it, but we have the original, and it's in pretty good condition. You can handle it, it's not falling apart at the seams. I mean, obviously, it's got a little bit of wear and tear, but it's handleable, which is really cool. But when I was reading it, it was actually really, really beautiful. It was a song about the last moments before a sister was about to go back to be with her king and her prince and her husband. So it's almost this joyous song. So like right at, face value, you're like, wow, that's kind of dark, not at death. What's that for? And then you read it and you're like, wow, was that for a memorial? Was that meant to be comfort to the sisters who are losing a sister? Was it meant to be read right before a sister passed to comfort herself? Brought around so many questions once I really started digging into it. And it was a perfect example of the importance that our community has in coming together and preserving that history. Because we have communications from a couple from 1984 that found this in their belongings. They had some kind of link to the sisters. I believe that the husband went to a school by the sisters and found it in their attic and said, we can think of no better place for this to be than your archives. No one's going to take better care of it, and it needs to be found, and it needs to be seen, and it needs to be used and appreciated, so we need to send this to you. And I think that is just so beautiful that our oldest piece of music is also the biggest testament to how important it is to keep it alive, and how much that we actually have in the history of that is what we, like, I lost my words there for a second, but you know what I'm trying to say correctly. The amount of information that we have surrounding this is not a normal amount of information that we usually find in our archives. To have that complete of a record for something that just also so happens to be the oldest record, it's pretty unique and pretty interesting. But yeah, I don't know if I just rambled a little too long for you, sister, but if you have any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I have some things that I want to just add to what you said. What Clarke mentioned was the different versions of Catherine's Suscipe, and then she also mentioned that the one we say is closer to Catherine's original. So Dolores Nerutka, in probably the 70s, wrote one of the ones that's pretty popular, and she deliberately wanted to update the language so that it didn't feel so kind of passé, you might say, or problematic for contemporary people. So she was deliberate in that, but she did follow the text of the Suscipe very closely. And so the refrain is, my God, I'm yours for time and eternity, which is really, that's what the Suscipe is about. That's the heart of it. Elaine Dacey used that same text. So she didn't make her own, she used Dolores's, but she wrote a different tune.
Suscipe telephone.
Yeah. And both of them were guitarists, as Clarke said. And so, actually, we do have accompaniments now for those because, fortunately, before Claudette Cherati died, I called her one day and I said, lots of people want to use the Dolores's and Elaine Suscipes, but a lot of people want piano accompaniment. If you write one for Dolores's, I'll write one for Elaine. So she agreed to that, and we did that. So we do have that now, and of course, they're not original to the sisters, but they were guitarists, and so they didn't write piano accompaniments. But I think it's important to think about when we're looking at not just settings of the Suscipes, but anything, and particularly music for prayer. Does this setting hold the weight of the text? Is the music fitting to the text? And the reason I say that is once in a while I'll hear what I think is a very serious text like, "My God, I am yours," or "Time of eternity." I mean, what else can you say? That's the most significant thing a human person can say. But the music doesn't have that same kind of gravity to it. So recently there's been a Suscipe written, not by Sisters of Mercy, but by two musicians. And they chose to focus on "Take from my heart a painful anxiety," which, as you know, is near the end of the Suscipe. But they're using that as the refrain. So that kind of shifts the prayer a bit. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, I'm just saying it's important when you're thinking about what setting to use, that you look a little bit more than just, "Oh, I like that tune." But to think about how does the tune match the text? Do they go well together? Does the tune really help to draw the text out? So I think that's important. It's, well, I'll just leave that there. The other thing that I wanted to say, when we started talking about what's the oldest piece we have, I got way back into like, how much did Catherine sing and what did she sing and do we know anything about that? So what I was able to find is that she wanted every foundation to have a piano. So now we know she was a dancer because in her letter she talks about dances, especially the grand right and left. That's an image that's become very important to us in terms of how we live our lives. And she said, we live our lives like a grand right and left. You're in one corner, I'm in another corner. We exchange places and we cross in the middle and then we go on. But I also discovered that she would travel sometimes with the musicians, sister musicians, when they were going to have ceremony. So then I thought, wow, we don't have any of that music. I don't think we do. Now, Elizabeth Strange records titles, and they're all in Latin, of course, which they would have been at that time. But I don't know that we have any of that actual music. But I thought, well, what about the people who came on the boat? The Queen of the West, the first 7. Did they bring music with them? Did they make sure they had all the music they needed? Because that pretty quickly, Xavier Tiernan entered the community. They would have had music they had to have for that ceremony. But that's probably lost in history. We're not going to do that. But it's just interesting to think about what they might have sung. Might they have entertained the other people on the boat with their Irish songs, or perhaps even in calm weather, their Irish reels? I think my favorite Catherine quote is, she was going to Bermondsey, and she wrote to Francis Xavier Ward and said, I have my list of songs prepared for the journey. Wouldn't you love to have that list? Mm-hmm. And it also says to me, she probably had quite a repertoire of songs that she had to sit down and choose which ones would be good for the journey. So it's amazing what you just kind of come across. And of course, talking to people like Sheila Carney, who's a wealth of information. And of course, we used to have Mary Sullivan. Hopefully she's still in our hearts and pushing us in the right direction. So, but it's been wonderful to discover some of those little pieces about Catherine. So Shelby, she's in distracted. Clarke, you came across some plays
Yeah,
and also some school songs.
yes. Yeah, so we actually have a fair number of plays in our collections, and some of them are non-musical, so I did not really include those, but a lot of them also either were musicals or sisters wrote like accompaniment for them. So I try to keep record of those. And then it was also really popular for sisters to be drama teachers and chorus teachers, and so they would help direct and write plays for schools. So we have quite a number of school programs that attribute music to sisters who were teachers. So I try to kind of keep my eyes on that. Like I said, not all of them have music, but it's important for me to make note when there is a creative sister that did take part. There's a lot of times where there is theater, there is music. And those things tend to go hand in hand. So I think I've probably come across some around 20, 25 plays, and at least 10 of them included musical sisters or sisters who were directing as far back as I want to say maybe the 20s. The ones that were older wouldn't have the sheet music connected to it. It was just an attribution or lyrics, or, you know, I try to keep note of those as well. If I see lyrics that are unique, I make note of that. So even if we don't have the sheet music for everything, we know that there's a parody somewhere or a diddly, or you know, try to keep record of all that stuff. So yeah, we have a handful of plays in our collection. It's pretty neat to see those as I'm going through and looking for music as well, because it's just a testament to the creativity of the Sisters of Mercy, and I feel like it's in the same spirit. I feel like that creative spirit is very strong and very important. And we do have school songs by sisters as well. Going back, I think our oldest one is from the 20s. Garnet and Blue, either late 10s, early 20s, and that's for California school, I believe. But yes, I'm not as well versed in the geography of Sisters of Mercy as I should be quite yet, but I'm working on it. Please bear with me. But yeah, it's always good to look out for and know about. And then when you were talking about historically sisters singing, that I was thinking about that yesterday actually, and how ingrained into Irish heritage music was, and how so many songs were never written down. They were just passed from generation to generation among friends and family. So you're 100% right. I really truly believe she probably had a long repertoire of Irish songs that she used for praise, worship, spontaneous songs, things that were just an overflow of joy, that she would have shared with the sisters, and it would have gotten passed down. We might even have songs in our circle that we don't even know about that's attributed to a Irish folk song, author unknown, because unknown didn't necessarily mean you don't know who it came from. It means it came from everywhere. Once you go far enough back, right? So I thought that was really interesting to think about. Once I put two and two together, it's like Irish heritage, they really, really care about music. It's important. So I could see it being very important to Mother McCauley as well, because she was, in fact. But, yeah, I had written a question, but you know how that goes. I turn myself all around.
Shelby, are we ready for questions?
Yep.
Like I have a question to you, so okay.
Okay. But meantime, you can be thinking if you have a question about something we said or something we didn't say. And we're also inviting people who are with us on Zoom to put a question in, it has to be on chat, right?
Mhm.
Online.
In the chat box.
In the chat box.
So going across, I recognize that there's some communities that were like a fair amount more creative than others. Just in terms of you have multiple sisters from Detroit or multiple sisters from Cincinnati. Is there a particular characteristic of those communities that you think fostered that creative spirit, encouraged multiple sisters to be creative? And also, what steps can we take to try and foster that now to keep the tradition alive? So we're continuing to have more and more creative sisters in the future.
I would just say from my experience that the Sisters of Mercy are remarkably supportive of those of us who work in the arts. That's not to say that we're not expected to pay our way like the rest of us do, but I've been very impressed with a number of us who've had very strong musical lives and who do all kinds of things in the church, in schools, and many different places. So I really hope that will continue. I'm happy to tell you there are a couple of new members who are musicians or musical. And so I've been able to let go of some of my anxiety. There isn't anybody to replace me. And hopefully some more will be attractive. I think if a person were an artist of some kind, that Mercy would be very welcoming and a good place for them to come to. So, and I think we come by honestly now that I know more about Catherine and what she thought about her own musical life and how she shared it. So just before we get into questions, I just wanted to say, so what's next? We're going to continue to dig as much as we can, but also have conversations now about how to protect the music, how to make it available. So Clarke mentioned Maureen Keys and Marion. She's working on a catalog so that hopefully pretty soon you will be able to go to the catalog and see whether your favorite piece is listed there. She's also working on a form that archives will have to be able to fill out. So if you call looking for something, they can take down all the data. And it will also be a way for them to track what pieces go where and how popular certain things are. We have had a little interest sometimes in people calling us and saying, you know, we heard the Circle of Mercy. We're a different community, we have a different charism, can we use it and change the word mercy? And I always say, I don't feel I can say yes to that. First of all, the composer's still living, Jeanette is living and married. But it's just an interesting thing. And it's happened with one of Elaine's pieces now too, they'll request to change the word mercy to fit another charism. So we really need people who will steward those and make sure that the original is protected. So, anybody here, let's start with the people who are here. Anybody have any questions about what we've said? Carolyn.
I have several. When you speak about protecting, you're talking about copywriting it?
Possibly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know, copyright doesn't always necessarily protect it either.
In the beginning, you said there were lots of questions about the scope of this collection, whether it would be just music written by Sisters of Mercy. Would it include, for example, the one you talked about, Take From My Heart, written by other people, but that have a mercy flavor, at least, to it? What decision has been made about that?
So as of right now for the collections, I define mercy music, things made for sisters, by sisters, or were used for worship by sisters. So it's kind of a more all-encompassing collection, so we can get the most comprehensive amount of works most available for you guys that we can. Yeah, so came to the conclusion that if it's for sisters or it's still inspired by Mother Macaulay, so I still got put it in with the collection.
Okay. And I'm assuming that this collection is about the Institute of the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas. It would not include Australian music. It would not include specifically the Irish sisters as such, correct?
That's a fantastic question. I actually do have a few pieces that are by sisters from overseas. If I can find them, or if we have them, I have been including them, but we do not have full access to them. If they want to send me to New Zealand to go look at music, I'll do it. But right now, the majority of what we have is Sisters of Mercy of the Americas, with the exception of a lot of things from the Circle of Mercy, because that was such an international project. We do have music from Australia, music from New Zealand, music from Guam, so everywhere.
So it's not confined.
It's not confined.
Open to other.
Yes, so if anyone has any music from a sisters outside of America, we're open to it. But yeah, and I think something that was really important that we talked about that I forgot to mention earlier is there's a massive amount of interest in the Circle of Mercy project in the 90s that was led by Sister Dolores. And what is in our songbook is not the same as what's on the CD. We have many more songs in the songbook than are on the CD. I believe there's only like 12 or 13 songs on the CD, but we have 40 or so that are in the songbook because Sister Dolores actually put every song that was sent for consideration to be recorded on the CD into the songbook so it could still be available to everybody, which I feel like is really, really important to know. Know that we have that for you guys as well.
I'm hoping that we might inspire Mercy International Center to put out the call for a World Mercy Music Project. I don't know that that will ever happen, but you know, if they hear that we're doing it, maybe they will feel called.
Has the Heritage Center reached out to the other congregations? Because I know for a fact they do not all have necessarily archive any type of archival staff or anything. So let me just interject for a minute. So the project as it stands really just focuses on the Americas, but if there is music from other Mercy communities, we're making a notation of it. So there's so much to do just with that scope in terms of resources, and fulfilling Sister Cynthia's vision, that's really what we're focusing on. But you're absolutely right, broadening it out and making those connections with different Mercy communities across the world, I think would be a great idea. Mercy International, having them have a central repository, I think would be an amazing project. But we're gonna wrap our arms around what we can right now. Shelby, do we have any questions?
Yes. We have a question that kind of goes back to the collection including music from other places. So Sister Pat Flynn says, does the collection include music from our sisters in CCASA in the Philippines?
I have been going through the Philippines collections that we have here. I'm going through all the collections that we have here, and anything that is in our local collection, I am encompassing into this broader collection. So if it is in our building, it is going on my collection list for the most part, as long as it was used by sisters, for sisters, or inspired by the sisters.
Well, one of the difficulties is, when I started contacting composers, it was the people I knew, and the people whose names showed up in chapter prayer books, chapter song books, or in ceremonies. But I'm sure there's probably other people out there that I just don't know. And so I rely on just getting the word out and hoping other people will, get sisters and say, is your music in the archives, why isn't it there yet? So, it's one of those things that you try as hard as you can to get everybody, but you don't know that you have everybody, so.
And if I can interject just one more time, again, because of the scope of the project, we're really trying to wrap our arms around what we have physically here in this building, and then we're going to build out from there, because those other local areas that still have archival material, we're not sure what's all there. So we're definitely gonna reach out and make sure that we present as a cohesive understanding of mercy and music as we possibly can. But again, we're starting just with what we've got right here in the building, get through that and then.
Another little wrinkle is, there's a lovely Suscipes in Spanish,
Yes.
written by a woman who's no longer a Sister of Mercy. So, I think the sisters in Casa sing it. I've heard it sometimes in the United States, but the question of ownership is a little unclear. So there's things like that too that we have to kind of figure out.
Shelby, anything else?
That was the only question from the live stream.
Okay.
Several years back, the archivists of the 5 communities in the States were asked to try to surface names, musical pieces, and I guess that goes back to the beginning of this project, and I don't know, I'm assuming that those lists, I tried very hard to contact people in all of the former regions that made up the South Central community to try to get people that could get me in touch with other people. But I was wondering, were those lists made?
Yes, your list was one of the lists I have in hand when I started to work.
I wouldn't want it to get lost.
No, I'm sure I still have it. I don't have it with me, but I still have it. Yeah, that was very helpful. Because as I said, I don't necessarily know everybody. Yes?
You mentioned that, they're written by a Sister of Mercy and for Sisters of Mercy and for a celebration of our life. Now, in the mid-2000, I think, when there was a revival of the Suscipes among our ministries and so forth, one of the pastor heard it, in a parish in Guam, and he fell in love with the music. I'm not sure which one now, but and said, can I use it for my parish church? And I think we said it's copyrighted, or we have to ask permission of the person who wrote it. So I think it was Sister Marian who was the president of our community, who wrote to whoever the author, the composer of the Suscipes, if it can be used in a parish setting,
Mm-hmm.
and they got permission.
Yes.
Is that becoming now a practice that it can be printed in a hymnal?
I get a lot of calls from people asking my permission for even the Amen we affirm, which is just a little refrain. And I always appreciate, just knowing where it is. And I think, yes, it's pretty common, and I don't think we want to be stingy about these resources. And if Catherine Macaulay's prayer speaks to people, I would say yes, But again, I think we want it to be acknowledged that it's ours. And that's partly why we're trying to make the process easier for people to get that permission, but to let us know that they're using it. Shelby, were you giving me a signal or just?
No, I was just, yep.
So
Yeah.
beyond sort of alleviating some of your anxieties about the music being protected and what comes next and that sort of thing, has this project or working on this project sort of spoken to your own creativity? Have you found yourself wanting to write more music? Or is it just too much and, you know, you get too many other things going on?
Well, actually, I'm going to be leaving my time in the membership in the Institute, and so one of my goals is to get back to my musical life, and I hope that I will feel inspired. And yeah, I think that, again, the interest in this project and the support of the Sisters for it does encourage you, because you know that whatever you come up with will find a home and will find a hearing. They may not like it. They might question, why did you write that piece? But that people will be willing to listen and be very appreciative. Yeah, thank you for that question. And thank you all for coming, and hope it was inspiring to you and for the people who joined us online. And thanks to Kat and to Shelby and to Clarke and to Maureen, who's been very helpful to us. So thank you all.
Are we off?
We're off.
So when is this